Hello and welcome to my studio. I'm going to introduce you to how I paint with this very small travel watercolor set. It doesn't have much mixing space on the lid, so I like to paint and let the colors mix on the paper instead of pre-mixing them on the lid. I'm starting with a light application of cadmium lemon. I'm using my travel set of brushes, which are what I use with this set whenever I'm out painting. These are Silverbrush Voyage travel brushes, and this is a set of 4. The brush that I'm using now is a number 8 round. As I paint, I'm leaving little spots of white in between my brush strokes. I like to do this because it gives my painting a little bit of sparkle. Sometimes I paint over them later with other colors, but very often I just leave the little white flecks of paper showing through, and I just love how it looks. The next color I'm going to use is Azo Yellow Deep. If you were to mix Azo Yellow Deep and cadmium lemon together, you would get a color that looks very similar to cadmium yellow. I'm using Azo Yellow Deep for the darker yellow accents in the flowers. Azo Yellow Deep is transparent and cadmium lemon is semi-transparent. I purposefully chose a mixture of transparent and semi-transparent colors to paint with. I find that if I paint with only transparent colors, my paintings sort of look like they were done with markers. And I really want them to look like they were done with good quality paint. All of these paints, by the way, are Rembrandt Professional Artist watercolors. Those are my favorite colors and what I use to paint all of my watercolor paints, including my watercolor sketches. Another thing to consider if you're going to paint with a small travel size watercolor set is that you want to have really strong pigmented colors, because you want to only need to use a little bit of each color as you're painting. That way you won't blow through all of your paint when you're out painting. So I just put on a coat of quinacridone rose, and now I'm going back in with another color which is called quinacridone purple bluish. This color is very similar to mauve, but it has just a little more light and beauty, and it's just a gorgeous color. And when it mixes on the paper, I find that you end up with some really interesting textures as the paint dries. Now I'm using cobalt blue by itself, and I'm going to go back in later and layer some violets over the cobalt blue. Notice how I'm leaving lots of little spaces of white. This gives the painting also kind of a nice light, airy feeling. Next, I'm going to add some quinacridone purple bluish into the cobalt blue sections of the light, airy flowers. I'm putting the marks of the darker color inside the middle of the shapes and towards the center where the stem is. This gives the impression of the entire flower vase being lit from behind. One of the questions I'm often asked is how much water to use. That's why a video lesson is really helpful, because you can see that I'm using quite a lot of water. I'm painting flat, so I don't have to worry about drips, but I'm not using so much water that the paint is spilling all over the place. I'm putting the water in the paint exactly where I want it to be. I like to have a good amount of water when I'm painting because I want the colors to mix together on the paper. I find that the effect of the colors mixing together on the paper is much more beautiful than if I were to pre-mix the colors in the palette. Sometimes I still do pre-mix some colors, especially if I want to make a very dark dark, then I have to mix 2 or 3 colors together. But my favorite parts of the paintings are always where I can look and find a really interesting area of a leaf or a flower or something like that, where the colors have just mixed together in a really beautiful way and left nice textures. I'm using Hooker's Green Deep on the leaves. It's a pretty bright green, but it's not too garish, and it's very easy to add a little yellow or a little bit of blue to it to adjust it to make it a yellowish green or a bluish green. It's also very pretty to sometimes add burnt sienna to it or yellow ochre to make the leaves look more natural if you're using the green for making leaves. I'm adding some yellow ochre to the green in this section, and you can see how the colors are mixing together and making the leaves look sort of like they're glowing. Even though I'm starting out with Hooker's green on each one of the leaves, I'm still going to have a lot of variety in all of my greens because I'm adding Azo Yellow Deep to some, Cadmium Lemon to some, and Ultramarine Blue or Cobalt Blue, and even Cerulean added to some of the greens is a beautiful addition. I also have Phthalo Green on my palette. This is a very strong color, and it's especially pretty when you're painting seascapes. In this case, I'm using it for some of the leaves at the top of the painting. Again, I'm going to layer other colors into this green, and I'm just painting this as the first wash. I'm using my number 6 brush right now, and I'm going to add yellow ochre to these greens. I'm adding the yellow ochre close to the flowers and leaving the phthalo green showing at the top. Next, I'm going to paint a pink flower on the left side, starting with Quinacridone Rose. Later, I'll be adding darker accents with Quinacridone Purple Bluish. I want to emphasize the light effects on this painting, and that means I need to add some deeper, darker accents to some of the flowers. This is my third layer of paint on the little blue flowers that are sticking up to the top and down to the left. So I'm using Ultramarine Blue Deep to add a few darker accents. As I layer one color on top of the other throughout the painting, I'll use less and less water so that the pigment is darker in value. I'm going to add some darker accents to the blue hydrangea as well, using the ultramarine blue. Notice how bright and pure the colors look when you don't mix them ahead of time. Just putting the colors by themselves, one after another, gives an amazing effect of light and color. None of the colors have a chance to get muddy this way either. Now I'm going to paint the ceramic vase. I'm starting with yellow ochre by itself, using my number 8 round brush and quite a lot of water. While it's wet, I'm going to add some burnt sienna and also some Quinacridone Purple Bluish. This vase is yellow on the bottom and green on the top, and I'll paint each section separately. This is the burnt sienna, and I'm going to put it on very loosely and with some squiggly marks. And because it's a tall vase, I want the direction of the brush strokes to be top to bottom, meaning that's the form of the dark shape as it moves through the vase. I often like to add mauve, or in this case Quinacridone Purple Bluish, to my browns because I find it makes them just prettier. They still look natural, but they're browns that have a little more color. For the top of the vase, I'm starting with phthalo green. Notice how much water I'm using. You can see the water and the paint are sort of bubbled up a little bit on the top of the paper. This is on purpose, and notice how it's still staying in place. I am leaving a white halo in between the green and the brown, but you'll watch later in the video some of the colors mix together where I don't want them to, but that's okay. Watercolor is a very spontaneous medium, and it does what it wants sometimes, and you just sort of have to go with it and appreciate it for its natural beauty. I'm layering Azo Yellow Deep and Cadmium Lemon into the phthalo green to warm up this beautiful cool blue. I'm going to layer some deeper, darker greens behind the pink and yellow flowers to really help them pop and come forward. I'm using Hooker's green and some ultramarine blue to emphasize the leaves and also to create some beautiful line work with my number 6 round brush. So I'm continuing to go around and around the painting, looking for areas that need to have a little bit of a dark accent. You can't have lights without the darks. I want my flowers to really sing out from this painting, so adding dark, deep, rich greens near the yellow, blue, and pink flowers really helps them stand out. Notice the white halo between the leaves and flowers. This is on purpose because I want the colors to mix in some places, and in other places I don't want them to mix. I wasn't sure which color I would choose for the reflection, but I decided to put on purple bluish, and I'm going to have a nice cadmium lemon accent on the right side for a little light accent. Having a little yellow on the outside of the reflection emphasizes the light coming from behind. Now I have done a color mixture on the lid of my palette. I've mixed cadmium lemon and azo yellow deep to make a more warm neutral yellow. I'm also using some yellow ochre to add just a slightly darker yellow accent and one that's slightly more grayed down than azo yellow deep. To the center of the flowers I'm adding yellow ochre, and I'm also going to add burnt sienna to make the very, very center of the flower. I'm going to use my number 2 round brush for this because it's a much smaller detail. Next, I'm going to stick with my number 2 round brush, and I'm going to make some beautiful red accents in the pink flowers using permanent red deep. Sometimes pink flowers need violet accents, but if you want to get them to have a sort of velvety look, it's really a good thing to try to use a deep red color. If you don't have permanent red deep, you could use cadmium red or pyrrole red. Those are also good rich red colors. I ended up with a little bit of a bloom here where my phthalo green made its way down to the brown part of the vase. The colors are still wet, so I'm just coming back in with a little extra quinacridone purple bluish and my number 8 round brush, and I'm just going to smooth this color out and make the paint just look like the nice wavy shape I wanted it to be in the first place before the bloom happened, and work that color down into the base. Now I'm mixing the final accent, which is a dark mixed with burnt sienna, quinacridone purple bluish, and ultramarine blue. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please remember to like and subscribe and share this video with a friend or leave a comment. I have more videos like this on my Patreon channel, patreon.com/Kristen Olson Stone.